How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today we finally answer the question, World War II versus Cold War. Which one comes out on top, and which would I suggest to new players, old players and veterans alike? Let's take a look at the beginning experience of both modes and how they really stack up between each other. So, first things first, silver. If you do not have any silver within World of Tanks, Cold War is not the first option that you should necessarily go into if you want to be competitive and learn the game and become really good at playing the game before you then progress on to doing different things within the game. Maybe you want to do specific tank lines, maybe you want to grind, etc. Because although yes, you can get into Cold War, you can earn decent silver at the lower tier, being that you get both, well, the free tanks essentially at the beginning of the tech trees within Cold War. They're not particularly very good when you now compare them to a lot of players who will have grinded up to the top tier within Era 1, and so yeah, it becomes very difficult for you to really have good games, learn the game, and so I think that that's really frustrating for a new player. So I think in terms of learning the game, the opportunity to learn the game, and without literally wanting to bash your head against a brick wall, World War II is probably the mode to go into to begin with, but that can all very quickly change once you've built up a little bit of silver so that you can then progress and get the better tanks to earn the more silver because you're playing better within Cold War. And that's something I think you should 100% do, and if you aren't already, get yourself to rank 100 on the battle pass currently as of the recording on this video, or if you're watching in the future, maybe there is a battle pass season where you can get a free premium Cold War vehicle which will earn you a lot of silver. So if you are a new player, that is exactly the route at which I'll be taking. For those of you veteran players, maybe you can give your own opinion in the comment section down below as to what you would suggest for a new player within the game. Would you go for Cold War? Would you go for World War II? At the end of the day, it is completely down to the player itself. Do you enjoy playing the type of game mode that Cold War is versus World War II? For me personally, I'd say World War II to begin with, then maybe shift over to Cold War once you've got a little bit of silver, and then progress that way where you can then get the second tank in the Era 1 and then move on up the tiers, and then you earn a lot more silver as you get further on, and then you can experience the different gameplay between the two. I think it's definitely good to have a variety between World War II and Cold War so that you aren't just playing the same game, and I think that the idea of Cold War was a fantastic option for wargaming to go into. As much as I don't like the game mode and the development that they actually did, I think it's good that we're moving towards creating new content. I just don't like the fact that a lot of the content that wargaming are producing are just forcing you or pushing you to play a specific game mode for a specific reason so that you can get certain operations, certain rewards from the game itself, even though you could probably want to do it on a different game mode. Maybe you want to play either one. I think that they're pushing very heavily for you to play Cold War right now, which is something I'm not so keen on. If I want to play Cold War, I'll play it. Don't force me into doing it, and that's something I think wargaming have definitely got wrong, but hopefully that will improve in the future. And if you're watching this in 2 months time, 3 months time, maybe that is the case. They don't need to push it as hard, and when more tank lines come out on it and you've got the variety, which is the next topic, is variety, then yeah, it'll become much better. Now, talking about variety in specific, in Cold War we are very limited to the amount of tanks that are currently within the game, and often a lot of the tanks within Cold War are tanks that are in World War II. So if you actually want to play new tanks, you have to grind out quite a lot of silver, you have to play a lot within Cold War, and then eventually you do end up with new tanks that aren't available within the World War II version. So a lot of people, yes, quite rightly so, are going, well, I've ground out these tanks within World War II and now I have to grind them out again on Cold War. Well, that's very disappointing from those players' perspective, and although it's probably the minority, because let's face it, not as many people have as much time to put into the game as maybe you or I if you're a veteran player, or maybe you're a beginner and maybe you don't have either. Well, do you like the fact that you can grind out two essentially of the same tank within the same game, but you have to do both and they don't count towards each other? I think that is a little bit of a thing that kind of gets annoying annoying for a lot of the players that are playing Wargaming's game, which is World of Tanks console, or Modern Armour, whatever you want to call it, same game. Now, in specific to the variety within Cold War, you've basically got three different tech trees, as we can call them within World War II mode, as opposed to like the 9 or 10 different tech trees that you've got within World War II. So instantly, from the very beginning, we can quickly say that if you want variety and you want the opportunity to play loads and loads of different tanks and tech trees and variety of different types of gameplay style, then I would suggest playing World War II to begin with. Obviously, maybe in 2 years' time and they've fully fleshed out the tech tree within Cold War, maybe you want to then do it. But I think for the minute, if you're wanting variety and a different thing to go around and try out, then definitely hop on to World War II and grind out some tech trees. But what I do want to say is that the amount of XP required to grind out all of those various things is hefty, and when you compare that to Cold War, although the initial amount of XP is much higher to get the first era tanks, etc., because they are all essentially the exact same amount of XP as you go through the tech trees. Eventually, when it comes to getting the higher tier rewards, it's the same as essentially getting the first tank from the very beginning to the second tank as it is to get the 9th to the 10th tank within Cold War. So this is really good in terms of getting loads of tanks really quickly and trying out new stuff, so you have that opportunity to kind of showcase variety in a different way. You may not have as many tanks, but you can get them quicker, is essentially what I'm saying, because when you reach tier 8 in World of Tanks World War II, then it becomes very slow. You're kind of cut off by an increasing exponential amount of XP that you're having to get every single time you level up and tier up. And so when you get to tier 8 to tier 9 to tier 10, you can be grinding out like 400,000 XP on one singular tank to get the tier 10, which is a lot of XP. And so, yeah, when you compare that to Cold War, you're effectively getting 3 tanks for just one tier 10. So, yeah, make of that what you will. Of course, it's very dependent on whether you want to progress within Cold War as to whether that really makes a difference to you. And hopefully with the addition of new tanks coming into Cold War, we'll get even more of a variety and we'll get interesting new ways to play the gameplay. And hopefully you guys will stick around for some of that content coming soon. But I am about to start a big grind into some of the Cold War tech tree tanks. So I don't know how well it will fare, whether I'll enjoy it, that's kind of down to me. But hopefully you guys will enjoy seeing a bit more variety in content. I think for players wanting to kind of test out both game modes, for those of you veterans that have only been playing World War II, I do have to say you have to give it a chance. As much as True Vision, you may not like it. If you want new content, it's the way you're going to have to go, unfortunately, because Wargaming's development cycle is that they're basically just focusing on Cold War and they're just giving out a couple of premium tanks on World War II every now and again. And a lot of those times, the World War II premium tanks are essentially just reskinned versions of tanks that we already have. And yeah, I think that that's not necessarily a great thing for trying to retain those World War II players. But I guess if they can generate more players from the Cold War game mode, then maybe that outweighs the point in even trying to develop World War II, because yeah, there's plenty of content there for players on World War II, and so I don't know, it's kind of one of those things. Obviously, let me know your opinions in the comment section down below. I think what we want to do now with this video is turn towards what sort of gameplay differences there are between the two modes, because that is something I think is really important to distinguish which game mode you're going to be wanting to play if you're a specific type of player. Are you interested in being competitive and finding yourself a big challenge and being able to really hone in on specific tank classes, or are you more of a very casual player and you want to just hop on and you want to play and you don't want to have to think too much and you can just kind of deal with it that way? Well, I think for the more intricate players, the ones that want to be a little bit more competitive, learn some more mechanics, then I think if we look at the amount of mechanics within World War II comparatively to Cold War, you've got more mechanics within World War II. And that is because you essentially have the whole spotting mechanics, which people somehow find very difficult. Essentially all it is that you have to be within a view range, which makes sense, of the tank that you're about to see to be able to then detect it, and then you can deal damage to it. Doesn't mean that the tank isn't actually there, it just doesn't render in on your screen. So for example, if you're seeing rounds coming out of a bush and the tank isn't spotted, you can still fire at the bush, they are still going to be there, but that's something you have to think of and use through your experience to be able to get damage. Whereas Cold War, you can see where people are for the entire game. It doesn't matter whether they're actually spotted, you can see them on the map, which I guess for someone that doesn't want to think too much, or someone that doesn't necessarily want to have to grind out different kind of ways of playing the game and learning all of the different mechanics and stuff like that, then it is a perfect kind of way to introduce yourself to the gameplay, how to get used to the controls, stuff like that. So Cold War, I guess in that regard, is quite good. But I think that it means that a lot of the traditional maps that were developed have kind of been very limited, and so the new maps being developed within Cold War as opposed to World War II are slower, and so we're seeing this kind of, you've only got a very limited pool of selection of maps if you play Cold War, whereas if you then go over to World War II, you've essentially got a very slim pool of new content coming out, whereas you've got a lot more maps. So yeah, I think blending both of them together is a good idea, so that yeah, you've got a balance of content for both game modes as well as being able to have a variety of different maps to play. Obviously the gameplay within Cold War lends itself to more kind of aggressive, kind of high impact, high energy kind of gameplay, where a lot of people are just kind of YOLOing, to be honest with you. I mean, it tends to work, especially if you're playing in a Russian tank within Cold War, so you've got that. I think compare that to maybe some of the other gameplay on World War II, it's a lot more slowed down, and for players that want to think a little bit more, maybe someone that isn't kind of in for the first person shooter kind of aspect of World of Tanks, which it tends to be the Cold War game mode, a lot faster gameplay where you've got literal tanks that are just twice as fast, and these are the heavy tanks comparatively, you know, that can go 70 kilometers an hour in a heavy tank, and then you've got light tanks doing 90 literally everywhere, so there's that. You know, your faster gameplay on Cold War, so if you're interested in that, that's the way I'd go. You've also then got kind of tanks that are literally more defined classes within World War II in terms of tank destroyers, light tanks, etc., where they are very much categorized by the specifics of each of the tanks, rather than, you know, yes, they might be called a heavy on Cold War, but maybe the armor doesn't actually work, and maybe they're actually as fast as a light tank. So yeah, I think that there's kind of not as defined parameters of the specific tank classes within Cold War. Obviously, you can have your own opinion, maybe you completely disagree and you think that Cold War has more defined classes and they are more specific as to the roles at which they play. Maybe that's the case, but from my personal opinion, from my personal gameplay of both game modes, which I've given a chance, you know, I have played Cold War as much as maybe visually on some of the content that I've made, maybe it comes across that it's a terrible game mode and no one should play it. I think it's a really good game mode that definitely has benefits, but it's not my kind of thing. I just don't enjoy that kind of removal of some of the skilled aspects within World of Tanks. So yeah, there's kind of that. Obviously, I think that what it is basically down to in the kind of summary is, do you want to earn a load of silver for playing the World War II game mode? If you're interested in World War II only, then Cold War is something you should take advantage of. Use those premium tanks that you get out of the season passes, out of some of the earn operations that you get for Cold War. Use them, play those tanks, put your silver boosters on those, because they will earn you 400,000 silver per game if you have an okay game within Cold War, meaning that then you can translate that silver over to the World War II, and so it just saves you a bundle of time of playing premium tanks on World War II, and so that's the route I would go for, as opposed to the opposite. If you're Cold War heavy and you've been playing a lot of that and you've basically ground out all of the game tank lines on that kind of game mode, then maybe you could give World War II a little bit more of a try and grind out some of the tech trees on there, because there are a lot more of them and you're going to be able to get some more diverse gameplay, especially if you're a new player and you want to experience some different things as opposed to the kind of fast-paced action of Cold War. Obviously, let me know in the comment section down below, which one do you prefer? Does it have to be a versus? Do they have to be in conflict with one another? Or can you use both of them to your advantage and actually enjoy both? That's my kind of thing that I've been struggling with, and I definitely have been enjoying both game modes, but more so because of the silver earning from Cold War. Obviously, let me know your opinion, and of course let everyone else know, and we'll get a good discussion going. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking out this video, and I hope you'll check out some of the other videos on screen right now, and I hope that I'll see you there. Goodbye.